the Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me the one and only Guion Hughes. How you doing, Guion?
Great.
That's great to hear. It's good to have you on the channel. And so let's go ahead and start out. Tell me where you're from.
I'm from Los Angeles. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, yeah, I went through pretty much all the scenes. I was I was born in 1969. I'm 53, so I was a teenager in the 80s. So I went through a lot of the goth scene and punk scene and alternative scenes here, and I'm still into that. I still go dancing and stuff like that. So that's my city. That's my scenes, pretty much.
Okay, right on, right on. And where would you say that your interest in magic began?
When I was 7 years old, it was 1977, and I think now looking back at the time, like the 777. But when I was 7, I was with my grandparents a lot. My parents were like having problems, but so my grandfather was trying to be like a father figure to me. And when I was, that was when I was 5 to 7, or from birth to 7, because my dad really just left. But then my grandfather died in front of me. And it kind of opened this big portal with all these spirits. And he came back when I was trying to sleep, as a child, I didn't understand it, but now I understand after studying that I was going into theta states, trying to sleep, and I would see the spirits coming, and he would come, and of course, the first few times I would scream and get upset and stuff like that. But the interesting thing is why I thought it was more real than just, of course they diagnosed me sleep paralysis, stuff like that, but he would tell me, don't tell people you see me, or you may, get locked up. You may get put in a hospital or something, because, that back in this was in the 70s, and they still did that, And so it was like, after that, I kept it quiet. But when I was a teenager, I started looking around. And this was also during, when I was a teenager in the 80s, even in LA, the satanic panic, because we had all these things. It was still very, if you had books on witchcraft, if you looked like a gothy, or you looked alternative, like you got hassled. And like the spirit said, a lot of times they would try to put people in mental hospitals or just arrest people because they didn't fit in. It was almost like, I think being a punk or a goth or an alternative occult person was almost like being, pushing yourself more as for trouble, is what they thought, the police and everything. So that's how I got into it as a teenager. The first book I got was the Necronomicon, and I thought that was just like the greatest thing. And I did some videos about how I used that, and actually, even though it's people, it's a controversial book within the occult community, but how I use that to try to get an understanding of my occult foundation, because the writer of the book, it said, in the Necronomicon, and even in the H.P. Lovecraft in his Call of Cthulhu, it says that a mad Arab, which I know that's probably not politically correct now, but that's just what it said. This is written in the 20s or whatever, 1920s. A mad Arab wrote the Necronomicon. So I did some research on that, and I landed on Al-Kindi, which I don't know if that's who they meant, but Al-Kindi was a Islamic sorcerer type. He was kind of like he's kind of like the equivalent of John Dee in the Muslim world, but he was, way around that time or whatever. So his ideas was that there's these stellar rays, and the stellar rays are like, just kind of like these unseen, like chords or something. They create reality. And this comes in later with when I studied Enochian and different things like that. These rays we can actually affect. And the way you said to affect them is, the first thing is speech. And it even says that in the Bible, it says that God spoke the world into creation, So incantation, is a big thing. And that's from there, from Al-Kindi, I got a kind of a foundation of like, that there's these unseen forces, whether you want to call them spirits or rays or whatever. He called them stellar rays back when he wrote his book, I think in the 15th century, something like that. And when you do things, it affects them. And what he says is, if you're a seer or you're a mage, you figure out how to move the stellar rays around and create your own reality. And he gives different things. The one thing he says is the incantation doing magic, doing things like that is great. Then he also went into like animal sacrifice because that was a big thing back then, and even, you even see that in the Bible too, that they did that, and they still, they did that for centuries. And it's, it's part of, they ate the animals, it's really kind of butchery and stuff. But the idea was that Al-Kindi said that an animal, when it dies naturally, it just, it just kind of dissipates. Its stellar rays, its life force just kind of dissipates into the thing. But when when a human being consciously and is thinking about things and does, slaughter the animal for eating and an animal sacrifice, and that changes the stellar rays, and that actually can like lead to like things, whatever you're thinking of, whatever your attention is, whatever going on in your mind while you're doing these things, then that's how it changes things. So that's how I got into it, and then from there, I started studying with different teachers and stuff.
Okay,
so,
right on. And how would you describe your magical style?
My what?
How would you describe your magical style?
My magical stuff, like
magical style.
Oh, magical style, yeah. Well, it's chaos magic, and I guess I adopt different styles and different techniques and methods based on what's best for me. And the chaos magic just gives me freedom, so I don't have to say I'm like stuck in one thing, and I don't like to like stay in one thing. So if I want to get into something else, I can just do it and not like feel bad about it or have people say, well, you last week you were into something else. I mean, I think we're allowed to do that, and so my style is more choosing what's best for whatever I think the situation is. I think that there's a lot of especially with the older styles like Goetia and Enochian, there's a lot of confusion because when we're trying to adopt these things that were developed so long ago in our modern context, it's always gonna be an adaptation because they didn't have the same ideas in their head. They didn't have like
Hello?
Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can edit that.
That's fine.
Yeah, I gotta turn off notifications or something. It's something flipped over. Anyway, so where was I? So yeah, in the modern context, we have phones, we have technology, we have all that, and then when we try to bring in these older techniques, I think it's always going to be like an adaptation anyway. So when people say, you have to painstakingly follow, like say, to create a talisman in Solomonic magic, it's like you're doing that, but then you're giving it to UPS. You're not like delivering it with a donkey, So like,
yeah.
You're using modern techniques mixed in, and then people might say, even if they painstakingly do it by hand and do it exactly how they thought, then most people don't hand deliver it or deliver it on a horse or a carriage or something like that. I mean, but that was how it was done. So I mean, it gets to the point where, I mean, do people want to be like kind of like a cult, like Amish or something, So I don't know. That's how I look at going too much into the past. I mean, there's a lot of purists, and I've read a lot of books about that, and it's cool, I get it, but it's like if you're using the magical Greek papyri and like in the modern context, and you're typing about it on the computer and you're posting about it in Facebook groups, I mean, that's just like not that you're putting media onto these things that never were intended. So it's like it's a mixed system. It's mixed traditions, mixed systems, no matter what, I think. So I just go all out and say I could do whatever I want. That's my style,
Okay. Now, how would you describe your first holy shit moment in magic where you say, wow, this really works? Like your first experience like that?
I think most of that happened when I was dealing with my grandfather's spirit as a child. I consider that kind of like crossing the abyss. People say you cross the abyss or find your holy guardian angel, because I mean that one main spirit I is still my guardian to a certain degree, and help me bring other spirits in and help me interact with them correctly and make sure that there's none that are gonna like do anything negative to me. So I think the ancestors and stuff is really powerful. And when I realized that, like I think that was that was one of the key things, was the spirits were telling me things that were very practical, that as a 7-year-old or even a 10 or 13-year-old, I couldn't really come up with on my own. So that's what I think was that. I think that there's also, when I started messing around with the Necronomicon and all that, I mean, I didn't know back then that, you know, it was kind of like fictionalized or whatever, but there were really, you know, things really happen when you mess with that book. I mean, I don't know, you know, I know people think that it's all made up because they use the H.P. Lovecraft name, but you know, Peter Levenda is probably the one who's Simon, who wrote it, and he actually, you know, was interviewed and said that they got somebody to translate, you know, actually translate like these Sumerian manuscripts that they had got a hold of, and you know, it's transliterated, but so is the Bible, so is everything. I mean, you know, everything's translated, and you know, English and all that, and it's put in our modern English, you know, because there was all these different forms of English. So of course it gets, you know, things get changed around, but that's for everything, you know. So I think messing with that and seeing that, you know, there's things you can move, you know, literally poltergeist activity and stuff when I'm just messing with this Necronomicon, especially years later when I realized a lot of people say, oh, it's just a totally bogus book. But that's when I realized, I think, you know, it's just a belief. It's our belief is the most important thing, not necessarily like the books or people telling you have to do it a certain way. It's your belief. If you believe you're doing it right, then you're doing it right. I've been doing that. You know, a lot of people come to me for things, and they're like, I don't believe. They just don't have confidence, especially like with out of body experience or something like that. I just did a video on that, and people are like, oh, it's just my imagination. But I'm like, your imagination is real, you know. So these are things that a lot of insights that came to me, you know, like imagination is huge. My teacher, I studied with La Mila Duquette for a couple of years, and this teacher of mine used to say, you know, it's all in your head, but you just don't know how big that is, you know, that our head, our brains are reality creation machines, you know, and we're going to create reality no matter what. It's just, do we influence and do we manipulate our minds and our bodies and do things that create the reality we want, or we're just going to get what we get, you know. So those were a lot of things. When I started studying psychology too, I was like, whoa, these things really fit in. That really, I consider magic, you know, like it's a psychological technology, you know. At this point, I think we're developed enough to like. I don't even like to use magic so much as the term, because it's very confusing, because you got the stage magic, you got Chris Angel and all those kind of things, and that's a whole thing. And then you got people that do the, you know, the Goetia and all that, and they're it's almost like a religion to them, a lot of people. And then you got the other groups like Salima that want to like define magic a certain way. So there's so many different things with this magic and occult that I like to just say, you know, I like to say it's kind of like parapsychology, you know, which is something that I did was trained in when I was in the Army, with the remote viewing, and they had meditation, and you know, they were even teaching people how to go out of their body. Then that was when I was like in the National Guard, I mean, I don't think it was official. It just got declassified in 2003. That this training by the Monroe Institute, that the Army and CIA actually paid them to teach us that. We were told not to talk about it, you know. So parapsychology is, you know, it's the same as magic. It's just based on science, I think. So at this point, I think we're growing out of the whole idea of magic, which I believe my definition of magic is getting results and not knowing how. With technology is getting results and somewhat knowing how, you know.
Right. So, okay, great. Now, let me ask you this: what book would you say changed your life?
I would say definitely. I mean, I did the Necronomicon when I was younger. Later on, I read some books about this you know, like the Liber Null. I really like Liber Null, Psychonaut, Peter Carroll, all his stuff, Phil Hine, all the Chaos Magic books were in the 70s when I was growing up. So I was able to later on get those, but first I got the Necronomicon, and then I got a copy. I'm not sure how I got Liber Null, but somehow it was around. The Satanic Bible was around also, which, you know, that's kind of more of a religion thing and more of an atheistic thing, but it does have Enochian in it, that was my first time I ever heard of Enochian, actually was in the Satanic Bible, which is...
What's been your experience with Enochian magic?
Well, I studied for about Well, I studied 2 years with Lon to learn it. I brought some friends in to to get it. Uh, my experience really, once I went there and we did the incantations together and we did stuff together. We had it all out. We did a few ceremonies. These spirits come to me and they give me my own unique language. And this is, I think this is for everybody. And I think this is where all stuff points to, even whether it's the Book of the Law in Thelema or the Bible, even it leads to glossolalia or speaking in tongues, and that's your like unique language, and the spirits will tell you what it means, or you'll just know eventually,
Mhm.
and that was another like real big thing was when I realized these things that the spirits were telling me to say, like when I looked it up, it was Egyptian for things, like one of the things is lamaka, lamaka ka, lamaka. I mean, these things, and the ka means soul in Egyptian, Lama ka is like raise up your soul. So like these are like other languages that came to me, and maybe it's subconsciously it just came out. I mean, I don't want to say I'm like, but it's pretty amazing that I felt that the spirits had me speaking in tongues, and then I realized that they're actually Egyptian words. So it's it's proof, I guess, to
That's
me
great.
personally.
I
Yeah.
like that. Okay. And I also understand that you're into Gnosticism. So go ahead and speak on your experiences with that.
Yeah, well, and that's another big thing that I read. This is more like when I was in my 20s and 30s. I read, some of these Gnostic texts, and that's a big thing that people don't know is, they found the Nag Hammadi library, which a lot of people don't mention it because it's Gnostic, right? And it's blasphemous compared to Orthodox Christianity. But the Nag Hammadi library was the equivalent of finding the Dead Sea Scrolls for Orthodox Christianity or whatever. So um, the the really the good book that I read that really gave me a lot of insight was it's called the Secret Book of John or the Apocrypha of John, and in that book it talks about how different basically the Gnostic thing is that you have the Adam and Eve myth. So we had this God, Yod He Vav He, or they call it Jehovah, and Adam and Eve, and the serpent. And a lot of people think, that God was God and he's good and everything. Adam and Eve is kind of like us, and the serpent is like Satan or the devil that tempted Eve to eat the fruit and get kicked out of the garden and all that. But I think the Gnostic perspective, they in those books, and a lot of Gnostics, not everybody believes this way, obviously, that calls themselves Gnostic, but in the Secret Book of John, it talks about how the the serpent was another Elohim or another god, and all these things were Elohims in this garden, and so the serpent was actually coming to try to help us. Where Yod He Vav He, the was more of an oppressor. They call him the demiurge. The idea, and it goes into this in the Apocrypha of John. It's really intense. Is the idea is that there was an archon, which is like another god. These archons come from the Paloma, which is another the god universe. One named Sophia, wisdom, and she, you know, Sophia decided to have a child, and not really consult with people and not think it out, almost like having a child too early, like teenage pregnancy or something like that,
Yeah.
and uh, that became our god. They call him Yaldabaoth, the son of chaos. That's what the Gnostics call him, right? Sophia birthed Yaldabaoth. So when she birthed him, and that's we've seen the image. It's a lion with a serpent body. That's Yaldabaoth. Have you ever seen? There's a lion head with a serpent body. That's
Yeah.
that's the demiurge or Yaldabaoth. And so that's our god. And that god was actually, once Sophia had that god, the other gods were like, this is too much. This is not good. This is like a highly deformed being. It's a very dangerous being in our world. So they put the god out. They put him out. And so Yaldabaoth became our god, and he created this reality, this universe, or this planet, or whatever you want to say. But because he was cast out of the God world and he wasn't given any instruction, he created our world kind of like the God world, but it's messed up. It's that's why we have all these things. That's why people say, that's the justification why people say, why are babies born dead if there's a God, a good God, right? The idea is that it's not a good God, really. I mean, he had flaws, and obviously these are his flaws that we're seeing, or their flaws. I don't know if it's male or female. That's another thing about these Eohims. Elohim is a general neutral word. So, and if you think about it, these things, these are spirits, so they don't really have a body like us or gender. They could probably change that kind of stuff. So the idea of the Gnostic is that the New Testament God came to us as the serpent or as a dragon, really, because the dragon actually, because he spoke, the serpent spoke, and at the end when Yod He Vav He, when the God finds out that the serpent tempted, he says, your punishment is you have to lose your legs. So he had legs at one point. The serpent had legs at one point, and it was taken away. So with legs and talking, I would say that's more of a dragon than a serpent. And then so that's there. So that serpent was the New Testament God to a lot of Gnostics. So the New Testament God was helping us along, coming along, and the New Testament God also has helpers, just like angels, but we call them people have called them demons to try to demonize it all. So that's the whole. It really turns Orthodox Christianity like on its head, And I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I like that viewpoint. A lot of people don't mention that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's way more justifying than just saying, a lot of the Christians say, well, babies are born dead because God needed an angel. I mean, nah, I don't. I mean, Christians, how do they? I mean, the Orthodox Christians, how do they justify that so many bad things happen here? And there's such a big discrepancy between the Old Testament God, who is like, I'm going to turn you into a pillar of salt. I'm going to, I've got all these rules, these kosher laws, and if you break them, we can stone you, or we can. For having a fire on the Sabbath, we could kill you, and all these things that were like seem silly. Or you say like the famous. I don't know if you ever heard the story. There's a prophet that people make fun of the prophet because he's balding, kind of like me a little. But and God and the prophet, he allows the prophet to actually sick bears on these kids with these minor children that were making fun of the prophet, right? So there's all this bad stuff in the Old Testament, and the New Testament is more like is more trying to help and that, and then also that's another link. Is a lot of people link Christ and Jesus with Lucifer, like almost like spirit brothers. But obviously Orthodox Christianity has blown that away and everything, because there is parts in the Bible that do call in Revelations, I believe Christ says, "I am the morning star," which Lucifer means the morning star. So there's all kinds of stuff in the Bible that it's been transliterated, like I was mentioning earlier. So transliteration is different than translation. Transliteration, like the King James Bible, like they sit down with the text and see what makes sense to them, and they're like, okay, that's what we want people to believe, and then they write it. They don't write it word for word, because some of this stuff doesn't make sense to them. So that's my take on Gnostic Christianity. I like it a lot. It's the only thing that's really helped me to understand things.
Okay. Now, what would you say is your favorite divination method?
I think I come from I'm mentioning Lon again. He had a book on divination, and he talked about all these his theory on divination, and I buy into it. Is that if somebody's asking a question, if the seeker's asking, or if you're having this question in your mind, or you're thinking about something, you'll get signs and omens and stuff, even if you're switching the TV and stuff. So, and I don't know if you've had that or if other people, but I get that all the time. And when I'm thinking of things, you get these signs. And I mean, a lot of times in my group, we call it chaos flow, because it's almost like chaos, it flows and chaotically these things pop up and like kind of show you this way. So I like to look at signs. I mean, I do tarot and different things like that too. But I like to look at just signs for my own personal divination, like omens and signs, and like Lon would say, you could do I Ching. I mean, he has all the different traditional methods, but also you could like just flip channels on the TV or something, and whatever you come across, you're like, wow, that could be an answer, it's insightful. I like to just use insight. I don't get too hung up on props and techniques and stuff, because because of the chaos magic, and also for my own personal thing, I like to just live in the divination of looking at signs and omens and stuff like that. That's really my favorite.
Okay, all right, great. Now, I mean, I understand that you mentioned about getting signs. I mean, it's been my experience that sometimes the gods will throw signs out to you, but it's up to you to go ahead and recognize them. Sometimes they just go over people's heads and they don't even realize they're getting signs. It's just some magicians just, don't focus, and they just tend to not pay attention to what they should, Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think, I mean, and I think also that, you know, a lot of times that's people don't clear their minds when they try to like do divination or assess their fate. They find what they want to find, you know.
Yeah.
And if their mindset or their process is that, you know, bad things are going to happen, then bad things are going to happen. I mean, a lot of these things become self-fulfilling prophecies. That's why I'm against. I just did a video on my TikTok and Instagram about these people. There's a lot of people coming trying to solicit readings, and like a lot of these people are just total scams. I mean, pretty much anybody who gets over like 100,000 followers on TikTok, there's like hundreds of Instagram accounts that are impersonating them. And some of them have a lot of followers. You know, it seems like, you know, I don't know if they buy them or what, but what's unethical about that, I think, is you know, they're leading people, you know, they're soliciting that. And a lot of times the DMs are all just straight scams. It's probably people like not even in the United States. You can tell they could barely speak English. It's like, I can't even believe that they I mean, I guess they're just trying to hustle or whatever. But people that are doing that, you know, they're doing that even like in lives, because I do on TikTok live and Instagram live. I'll go into somebody's live or they'll come into my live and say, do you want a reading? Do you want a reading? It's like, I mean, in my video, it's kind of funny, but I'm like, you know, I want to tell these people, I don't want to start conflict, but I'm like, if you were really psychic, you'd know we don't want your readings, you know?
Right. They'd be able to pick up on that energy. Yeah.
We're having fun and spread our, you know, learn and spread our stuff. They're the equivalent, you know, asking somebody for money for a reading when you're trying to go live with them or in their DMs is the equivalent of like panhandling outside of a market, you know, and people are going to the store to get their supplies or do their business or have fun to the shop, and then they get harassed by people out front, you know, give me change, give that, can you get me that? Can you? It's like we're not here for that, you know, and it makes the whole community look bad because you know, people get scammed. They get pushed into things they don't want to do. These people also, they're very unethical with I don't like it when people, you know, they say you got like a dark cloud over your head or somebody put a curse on you. I mean, they try those techniques, which obviously for experienced people like me and you is fine, but people are just getting started out, they might fall for that, you know?
They will. And they do a lot. A lot of people fall for that.
And then when somebody like me or you is like if they meet somebody like me or you who's real and has experience, they're gonna be like, oh, it's all BS, you know, it's all no good, you know, it's so they're really hurting the whole community. And I know a lot of these people, you know, that are in the DMs that are just trying to do text readings or just fake. But I've seen a trend even with people in lives, which, you know, I guess they're hustling, they're trying to make it, but there's other ways to hustle online, you know, just create content, you know.
Some of them can be legit, but, you know, majority of them, you find that they ain't the real deal.
Oh, yeah,
but,
yeah. And plus, people shouldn't, I mean, people, if they have their practice straight, people will come to them when the time is right. If you're constantly soliciting, it's not good. And then most people that have been, you know, because I mean, look at, I'm 53 and I started out, you know, forming groups and witchcraft groups and stuff when I was 13. So I got 40 years experience, and I've been in LA all this time. I got all these people and they all do readings. You know, my goth people, my witchcraft people, they all do readings, and they want to do it for me, and I don't even want to, you know, because I don't want people to, you know, it's almost like sometimes readings can become where you're telling the person you're reading this in them, but you're really just pushing that on them. Like if I say, oh, right, read on you know, you got some bad things with you, and what they're trying to do is hook you in, so you keep going back to them to try to get the bad stuff out, but it's stuff that they're telling you. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, it's manipulation. It's highly unethical, and it's really disturbing that trend it's really upticked lately, you know, with constantly, you know, reading requests for readings. It's just, you know, I think it just has to do with inexperience for the real people, and then the other ones are just scamming. But that's a big concern of mine.
Yeah, it is. And so before we close up here, what can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I mean, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. So I'm putting out content. I'm hoping to do more series and more collaborations like this, more interviews and bringing more people in and talking about things. That's what I'm doing. Eventually, one day, I'd like to write a book about all this experience. But I think myself, because I'm more of a talker and presenter, so I would probably get like help from somebody if I wanted to do that. You know, there's a lot of that's another thing I wanted to mention before we go is you know, it was hard for me to tell people how to do magic. I was never a magic teacher till later on when I had to learn it because I would just have the spirit, you know, the spirits came to me when I was a child, you know, my grandfather and the other spirits, they would just tell me to do things and I'd get results. They wouldn't tell me why or how or any of that. So later on, I read some different books by different people, and modern authors are really good with this. I mean, like Jason Miller is really good. I think is telling people how this stuff works. Even modernly, is like Taylor Elwood is really good. I think as far as telling people how the nuts and bolts of this, you know.